This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest, award-winning thriller and horror writer and podcaster, making her fourth appearance on the show to date. It's V.P. Morris.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be back. Hopefully you don't have any reservations at Dorsia to get to anytime soon.
I don't think they would allow me in, personally. My behavior the last time was pretty poor. So what have you been up to since the last time that we saw you? I believe it was last July?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, the summer. I have a new book coming out. It actually releases tomorrow as we're recording, so probably it'll be, in the past when people are hearing this. But it's called The Devil We Used to Know. It's a paranormal thriller that jumps back in time between now and high school in the 2000s. So if you like creepy stuff and do have a lot of nostalgia for the 2000s like I do, please check it out.
Excellent. Is there going to be an audio book or any other form that's going to come in?
Yes, I have been working on the audio portion. I recorded it myself, so hopefully if I can get everything edited and sounding okay, it will be released sometime in the next few months. But as of right now, it's just a ebook, but other editions, hopefully audio, will be out soon.
And where can you find that to purchase?
At Amazon. Yep. Kindle.
Excellent. Okay. Cool. So, are we ready to get into tonight's episode?
Yeah.
All right, let's start out here. Tonight, for our 257th episode, we discuss American Psycho from 2000, written and directed by Mary Herron, with Guinevere Turner, music by John Cale, cinematography by Andre Sakula, starring Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, Justin Theroux as Timothy Bryce, Josh Lucas as Craig McDermott, Bill Sage as David Van Patten, Chloe Sevigny as Jean, Reese Witherspoon as Evelyn Williams, Samantha Mathis as Courtney Rawlinson, Matt Ross as Lewis Carruthers, Jared Leto as Paul Allen, and Willem Dafoe as Donald Kimball. Background for the movie: American Psycho was released on April 14th, 2000. On a budget of $7 million, the film would go on to gross roughly $34 million, finishing as the 95th highest grossing film of 2000 worldwide. The film originally debuted at the Sundance Film Festival earlier that year and was polarizing for many critics, with some enjoying the horror comedy and Christian Bale's performance, while others criticized it for its excess violence. Since the mid-2000s, the film has attracted a sizable cult following, which has grown in the 2010s on various social media platforms. In 2014, What Culture included Christian Bale's role in their top 10 most convincing movie psychopath performances. Bloody Disgusting, I believe a publication that is a magazine, ranked the film at number 19 in its list of the top 20 horror films of the last decade, with the article praising Christian Bale's disturbing, darkly hilarious turn as serial killer Manhattan businessman Patrick Bateman, a role that in hindsight couldn't have been played by any other actor. American Psycho currently holds a 68% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 64 score on Metacritic, and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we begin each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I had none. I barely remembered this movie existed because it came out about the time that I was in full bore with children and work and did not know much about it. Was aware of it with Christian Bale. That's about it.
So I, like you, had never seen this film. I put it on the list strategically because there were a lot of people that had questioned whether or not I had seen this movie. So often I put on things on the list for us to cover simply because I just need to catch up with them and I need a reason to fit it into my schedule, especially with law school and everything else, that everybody is well aware of my complaints and time schedules and everything else.
Yeah.
So Coming into this one, I knew that it was a Christian Bale performance that had been celebrated by a lot of people on the internet. There are several memes that have been widely circulated. So it was in some people's opinion, significant hole in my filmography watching. And so I had no relationship. I watched this in the car on our way back from New Mexico the other day. And I will reserve what I think overall of the film for the moment. But I have to assume that our guest strategically picked this film because she has a long-ranging relationship with this movie.
Man, I love this movie. It's one of those things where every time I watch it, I'm tempted to put it as my first, but then I remember that there are other horror movies and general movies that I like better. But man, I love this movie so much. Starting back, so I was only 7 or 8 when this movie came out, and I remember it was this sort of kind of around the playground talked about this horrific, you can't tolerate this level of violence. This is a torture porn level horrible thing that just it was built up to be this insane thing in my amongst kids who I think had older siblings and who had seen it, and kind of just you'd walk by the cover at Blockbuster and be like, oh my god, I couldn't bear to watch this. So I finally got around to watching it when I was in my early 20s, and first of all, I don't really find it to be that particularly horrifying. I mean, it's not pleasant at times, but it is definitely not the goriest or grossest thing out there by any stretch of the imagination, and it's actually freaking hilarious. And I feel like people sometimes focus too much on the violence and don't realize that this is one of the funniest horror movies of all time.
So, Dan, I'm going to introduce a new regular second question, especially for movies that we are seeing for the first time, as we've had a couple in recent memory. Last week's Ex Machina, neither you nor I have seen that movie prior to watching it last week. And we've had some other ones where I've strategically put them on the list for us to finally get to them. Did you like the film? Let's just put it that way. Let's make it blunt. Did you like the film?
It's not that I liked the film. I loved it. It made a comparison or brought something to mind that I had never thought of. The complete parallel between greed and sociopathy. They are so tied. It is so, I mean, you have people who just, because they're a sociopath, kill and slaughter and be violent. And you have people, because of greed, do almost the exact same thing. And it never dawned on me how close they were. This is the ultimate film against greed. It opened my eyes to the fact that Wall Street is a horror film.
The film with Michael Douglas?
Yes.
Okay.
Because of their lack of ability to empathize with anybody else other than their own greed. So there's a whole cadre of films out there that I think could be recharacterized as horror films because of greed and their lack of compassion or concern. And so when you're talking about what this movie is about, I can mention people like the Sackler family.
You mean the Sackler family?
Sackler family at
Purdue Pharma?
Elizabeth Holmes, who fabricated stuff and let people die with her false cancer testing. I mean, all these people, they're all the same. Christian Bale takes it to the umpteenth, and that's the whole point of this. That's what makes it more of almost of a comedy, is the fact that he goes beyond just the Wall Street self-aggrandizing person, the one that's so worried about his prestige, his look, his image, and is all about the greed and the money without any compassion or concern about anyone else.
I'm glad you liked it. I was very afraid that this was going to be Fight Club 2.0, a film that will live in infamy on this particular show. But that I thought that there were so many parallels to what I had assumed about both the plotting and its subject material that you would find it very problematic in that range. I had a very difficult time watching this because I, as you know, am a self-proclaimed comedy snob. So I found it very difficult to find much humor in this film. I also am a very big character and story and plot person. And so the constant interweaving of different things of reality and unreality and side comments that may be just in his head, all somewhat very confusing to me. I think that, though, in doing the prep for this, reading back through the quotes and a lot of the other associated things, thinking back on it, I've lightened my stance from when I initially finished the film, which I was very critical of it in that moment, to one where I have at least a modicum of respect for what it's trying to accomplish. And I think that it lends itself to repeated viewings where I'm not quite so focused on the plot and the story itself, that I can at least see some more of the humor portions of things as it goes along. I will just say that the first time that I watched in high school Anchorman or The 40-Year-Old Virgin or Wedding Crashers, I didn't quite find them as funny. And that it is only through repeated viewings, which Will Ferrell has gone on record in interviews in saying that the more often that you watch a lot of his comedies in particular, they insert stuff that's in the background that you don't necessarily focus on the first time because you're so worried about the story and the characters, that films become funnier the second time through for you. And so I'm hoping that if I give this another try in a few months, get myself a little bit more removed, give myself a little bit more time to separate out, that it will become what both of you see in the film comparatively. Because there are a lot of people, especially on Letterboxd, it's got a pretty decent rating at a 3.8, that love this film. And I'd like to come to that. It's just, I'm not there yet.
The satire of this. There are 3 points I wanted to make with the satire. One, the business cards. Oh my. I mean, it's hilarious because I've seen people do that, especially people in my profession, and they are so caught up on stupid stuff. Now the big thing is, and I talked about doing it while we were on our conference, of getting the e-business cards that you just walk up and tap it on somebody's phone, and it puts all of your contact information into their phone, hooks them on to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. You can set it to do that. That's for convenience. There are people, this is status. That's number one. Number two, all of the restaurants and the getting the reservations done, status and all of that. It just got cut. And then finally, everybody who lives by their date timer or their planner. And at the end, the date timer goes from being appointments to his deranged drawings of murder and homicide. I just thought that was clever too, because it shows the level that people go overboard with their date timers and try to pursue their own, I don't know how you would phrase it, their own claim to fame, I guess. So I just thought those were 3 brilliant concepts within the film.
So, what is the film about? I know we've kind of tangentially touched on it so far.
Well, I think it's about how consumerism can basically destroy the soul of the person who is both the consumer and who is being consumed. Obviously, we know the basic beat. It's about a Wall Street financier who does some kind of job, which we do not know. I guess he's a vice president, but they're all vice presidents, who secretly has murderous rage and attempts to constrain it with consumerism, but cannot. And at the end, cannot escape from his own hell, essentially.
I agree with all those points. I would also add in that there's an element of toxic masculinity that exists throughout Wall Street, especially, that is exemplified through this, and how there's just a lack of any real, I don't know, ability to empathize or to put yourself into any concern or care about anybody other than oneself.
I think, as with most movies about the 80s, with any modicum of hindsight, it's a movie about excess, one. But the movie also lends itself to a lot of criticism on white privilege that leads to a vast amount of emptiness.
Yeah, actually, are there even any people of color in this movie? Now that I think about it, pretty much none. I guess maybe some background characters at the dance club.
The homeless man who's murdered.
Oh
first.
yes.
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah,
unfortunate.
that's
Yeah.
Which I thought was a pure statement as to white privilege.
By the way, because I thought that guy looked familiar in some way, shape, or form. If you ever watched the Netflix series House of Cards, he was the barbecue shop owner.
Oh,
so drawing two things together of potential psychopath characters. Let's say that. I don't feel like getting sued anytime soon.
Yeah, you got to specify that because there's some people on the internet who cannot tell the difference between when you're criticizing, or not even criticizing, just talking about a character versus their actor. It's sad sometimes. Yes.
Well, according to some actors, the character and the actor are not even separate. But that's like another. Well, some of the things about Christian Bale were not separable.
Yes.
But we'll wait to get really deep on that until we get to the next Daniel Day-Lewis film. We haven't covered one yet, have we? It'll be coming. I know definitely for 2027 we'll be doing There Will Be Blood, and I will have to swallow a little bit of pride on that one. Anyway, this may be a leading question on my part, and somewhat in the effect of having put all of the notes together, particularly these questions, right after having finished the film. But who is the audience for this movie?
So I've read the book as well. So I think the book is for men and the movie is for women of about the same age group of like early 20s, 30s-ish range. Though I think it obviously can be enjoyed by a wide range. But the book is definitely, I think, leans in a lot to more of the masculinity issues than the movie does, which is still there. But I actually think the movie, in my opinion, is enjoyable for women because it's seeing someone who is kind of like our worst nightmare, a predator of women, but he's also a kind of a buffoon. So obviously he is scary. And if we do believe that the murders that he does are real, which we'll get into, but if he is doing all the things that he says he's doing, he's obviously a threat to women, but it kind of makes him, his people at work don't respect him. They don't even remember his name, even if his dad allegedly owns the company. So you would think that at least that would mean he's being remembered more than the average person, but not even then. He's unhappy. He literally just wants to fit in and he can't because he's not right. And it's just it actually not that I want to give him sympathy, but it kind of is like, it takes the piss out of him a little bit. So it takes this like uber predator and he ends up being like on the floor in his office crying and saying all sorts of crazy things. And it's kind of a little bit cathartic of seeing someone you would originally be afraid to run into at night, but he's also kind of an idiot.
I know I've seen a lot of criticisms from the reviews of the book comparative to the movie, that the book seemingly leans into a lot of misogynistic tendencies, and they were very afraid of the adaptation of the book being or leaning into those same characteristics. And the fact of having two female writers and a female director seemingly leaned more into a satirical version comparative to the novel, which may or may not be quite as heavy. I don't know. Obviously, I haven't read the book.
The book is heavy, man. That's rough. So like the book had the reputation I was talking about the movie. The book deserves that reputation. It is overkill happens. I mean, it'll be pages of describing a murder or just like cutting up a body, like doing stuff to a dead body, really over the top murder. So it's one of those things where the question kind of towards the end is, did any of this happen? Because it becomes at a certain point, it goes from like, so I stabbed her out of rage to like this elaborate setup of killing someone that you're kind of like, okay, yeah, New Yorkers are cold, but I think they would notice if he's exploding a body with fireworks or he did something crazy with explosives, like, or there's a car battery, all sorts of insane stuff. So yeah, the violence and the misogyny and homophobia in the book are much, much more extreme. Every other word is like the F slur for gay men or whore or something of that regard. Even, it'll just be like a waiter comes by and then he gets the order wrong and they're like, oh, that, F slur did this. So like it just, everyone is that. And you kind of, after a certain point, you have to kind of ignore it to finish reading the book because it's just like everyone is saying these horrible slurs at each other all the time. So it really leans into like how toxic they are as people. There's actually a lot of AIDS phobia going on at the same time, where they're like afraid to dance with strangers at the club. Sometimes they're like, can you get it from sweat? Can you get it from this and that? Like there's a lot of like, and you know, like Lewis Carruthers is a much bigger character and is kind of like, Patrick cannot handle the fact that there's a gay man that is interested in him and is much more pushy about it than the one little scene we see. So yeah, the book goes hard. So it's a good idea that they reined it in, and that yes, there's violence, but it's definitely not to the level it could have been.
Yeah, the excess violence that was criticized in the moment, I would agree with you. I don't think is nearly to the level as described how the book goes. While it does have certain moments like the bodies stuffed in the closet or basically hung up, or the head in the refrigerator, it's not to the level of what I would expect from a true slasher film, or even Saw, which we covered in the fall, has a lot higher degree of violence and gore and things of that nature that you would expect from a modern horror film.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where like sometimes it doesn't even get called a horror film. It's like a black comedy or a black drama or something like that. And I mean, I do think there is obviously a horror element to it, but yeah, it's not as, in my opinion at least, not as bad or not as gratuitous as people think. And one of the things that I like about this movie is not to insult some people, but it's kind of, in my opinion, like an IQ test. Like if all you see in this is violence, you're not looking hard enough, or if all you see coming from like a young male perspective is a cool guy with a lot of women and nice suits, you're missing the picture. Like there's just so many people who their first reaction, sometimes, you know, like maybe a person, usually maybe a young woman who's not experienced with horror, might just see the violence and think, oh God, this is just exploiting the violence against women. And I'm like, no, it's critiquing it. Like it's not, some movies do revel in the violence. And I don't think it is. I don't think it's exploiting or enjoying it or making you kind of gawk at it, because it could be much more horrific than it is. I think it's all about what it's trying to tell you about this person or this type of person, this type of culture that could create this being. And then the same from the young man perspective, Patrick is a joke. He's not supposed to be the Sigma alpha male. Like, I feel like so many of those types of people who kind of use Patrick Bateman as this, like, I don't know, offhand representative for what they want to be. I'm like, you don't want to be Patrick. He's miserable. He is in hell. He's not what you want out of life. Same with like Tyler Durden. You don't want to be him. He's the joke.
It has a more poignant ring now, I think, looking back on the 80s than it did as close as it was to the 80s when it was released.
Yeah, and actually, since this is my multiple viewings of it, I think I might be getting closer to like 10 viewings so far. I saw a lot of like modern influencer culture in there, even though obviously that did not exist in the 80s. But I feel like if Patrick existed in 2020s, he wouldn't be like a business worker, maybe like a finance bro or like a tech startup bro. But I feel like he would be more one of those guys who is like, wake up and grind, and has, you know, all these silly videos about how they wake up at 4 a.m. to go swimming in ice and do all sorts of like crazy stuff and have some sort of like Lamborghini, you know, driving around the city doing all sorts of stuff just to get attention. But, you know, on the inside, they're not really doing anything of value. Very similar to like Patrick doesn't do anything all day, where it's like that type of influencer is just kind of pretending to be a successful person instead of being a successful person.
Would Patrick have a green juice machine in his office?
100%.
100%. Is he likely to have taken government subsidies in order to create the only car company that is not exposed to tariffs and potentially be the head of a government efficiency program? Yes, likely.
Possibly.
Yes.
But I don't know. I feel like he wouldn't even be. Maybe the facade would go up if he had that much exposure, because he kind of needs to somewhat fly under the radar or like be completely in control of his narrative. Which, like, I feel like he's more of an Andrew Tate than a like MAGA type person, because I think there's like Patrick wouldn't even have the capacity of having a political opinion, because as we see in that one scene, he just lists off all the causes he cares about, and he doesn't actually care about them. He kind of is like, but we need to save the Sri Lankans, and we need to save, which I didn't catch till like this recent watch. He says the Israelis are fighting the Sikhs in Sri Lanka, and I didn't even catch that how like
I thought that was hilarious.
not true that that is. But I just feel like he would just list whoever his intended target is, he would just list what he wants them to hear. Like he would just be whatever he thinks they are into or whatever religion they're into. He's like, oh, I believe, just to get their money and attention. So I feel like he would just try to be as neutral-ish, or just sort of regurgitate the talking point of the day back just to like get clicks, and not even be like, just he wouldn't even be able to care. Like he's so empty, he can't even care about a cause.
Okay, Dad, are we ready to dig further into this? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. American Psycho follows Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale, a wealthy and successful New York investment banker in the 1980s, whose polished and charming exterior hides a chilling secret. He's a violent, unhinged killer. As his grip on reality begins to fray, the story delves into themes of consumerism, identity, and moral decay, leaving us questioning what is real and what exists only in his fractured mind.
Thank you. Did you know? Looking for a way to create the character of Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale stumbled upon a Tom Cruise appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman from 1993. According to co-writer and director Mary Herron, Bale saw in Cruise, quote, this very intense friendliness with nothing behind the eyes. And Bale subsequently based the character of Bateman on that. Interestingly, Tom Cruise is actually featured in the novel. He lives in the same apartment complex as Bateman, who meets him in an elevator and gets the name of the movie Cocktail wrong, calling it Bartender. Did you know? During production, Christian Bale followed the morning routine that his character Patrick Bateman describes toward the beginning of the film. Did you know? The film had various problems with designer labels during production. Cerruti agreed to allow Christian Bale to wear their clothes, but not when the character was killing anyone. Rolex agreed that anyone in the film could wear their watches except Bateman, hence the famous line from the book, "Don't touch the Rolex," had to be changed to "Don't touch the watch." Perry Ellis provided underwear at the last minute after Calvin Klein pulled out of the project, and Comme des Garçons refused to allow any one of their overnight bags to be used to carry a corpse, so Jean-Paul Gaultier was used instead. Did you know? Christian Bale insisted on getting Bret Easton Ellis's approval for his portrayal before filming and arranged a meeting. Bale showed up to the meeting dressed and groomed as Bateman, even introducing himself as Patrick Bateman. After 10 minutes, Easton Ellis begged Bale to stop because his hands were shaking and he could not take it anymore. Easton Ellis has said that this was the single creepiest moment of his life. And finally, did you know? Christian Bale was warned by many that it would be a career suicide for him to play the lead in a film like this. This only made him more eager to take the part. Inspired by Nicolas Cage in Vampire's Kiss. Fortunately for him, the opposite turned out to be true. Bale's role in the movie was considered a breakthrough performance and enabled him to shift his career from supporting roles to leading man status in the decades to come. This finally culminated in roles in the Batman and Terminator franchises, wide critical acclaim, and as well as several movie awards nominations, including an Oscar win for, anybody? The Fighter.
Fighter.
And so with that, we will take our first break and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 258th episode, we welcome back Instagram and Letterboxd film commentator Joe Bucari to re-hit the links as we revisit Caddyshack from 1980. Written and directed by Harold Ramis with Brian Doyle Murray and Douglas Kenney. Cinematography by Stephen Larner. Music by Johnny Mantel. Starring Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Rodney Dangerfield, and Ted Knight. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. And before we get much further, VP, what's going on with you? Where are you and where can people find you?
So I am on Instagram mostly and Twitter, aka X, at TWriteRepeat, though I'm much more active on Instagram. And I also have a website, VP Morris, that you can link to any of my books. I have two other books that are out, Shadowcast and Dead Ringer. They are all on Amazon, so you can find those there.
Excellent, excellent. And we already talked about your new book, but anything else you would like to say about it? Maybe some plot premise or something?
Yeah, so it starts in modern time with a husband who's being interviewed about his missing wife, and it then goes back to their time where they met each other in high school about a negative, evil entity that was haunting their school and how they had to fight it off, and how he is claiming he didn't murder his wife. The entity came back, and it's about whether or not the police and the interviewers and all the other people believe him. It has a lot of, there's a little bit of comedy in it. I don't fully label it a comedy, but there are funny moments similar to American Psycho where it's more creepy and scary, but I try to make some parts of it light and fun. And there's a lot of, if anyone was into the emo subculture during that time, I make a lot of references because, they're in school in '05, and that was when it was raging. So I try to make it as like fun and nostalgic for people who were in high school during that time, like me. So if that sounds good. It's on Amazon, so hopefully people pick it up and enjoy it.
And if you are into any books or would like to find her, all of the links will be available both on the website as well as in the show notes. And we will have several different things up on social media during the week of this release. So you can find any of that there. All right. We left off at best performance. Dad, who did you have down?
I had Christian Bale. I thought his performance was absolutely mesmerizing. How he could go from being on the edge of being just an absolute sociopath to the next moment being over the top with his, I don't know how his demeanor, the way he was presenting himself at times, like when he would talk about the music, was just bizarre. And it was hilarious. And I don't even know how to characterize it. It was just very enticing. You just were drawn into the character.
I have him as my best secondary and most charismatic performances. I think he is a seminal part of what this film is. And I think for the most part, most people focus on him. He's in every scene, he's doing the voiceovers. The movie kind of becomes about him and his portrayal in this. But for what it's worth, I'll just highlight that for me, the best performance in this one is Mary Harron, because the perspective that she brings, not only as the writer, but as the director, in setting the tone of what this is supposed to be and changing kind of what we're I'm making a bit of an assumption having not read the book, but supposedly changes from the explicit and gratuitous nature of the book to a more humorous version in this. I don't think can be understated because it really develops on how people view the film or why it's become popular. Even though the book was popular in itself and I believe was a bestseller at the time that it came out, I think the film has a different life based on the tone changes and how it's perceived on a film version comparative to the novel. So I think for that and her importance in setting that up, I have her as best performance. But I certainly can't overlook Bale. He is the most central and recognizable figure to this film. That's why I have him in both secondary and charismatic.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth for Mary Harron. She's my best performance because of what you said. As having someone who's read the book, she did do a good job of distilling it for an audience. Even though there were obviously some people who objected or still object to this movie, it is definitely much more team. She kept the essence of Patrick Bateman. It's very clearly the same man, even if the details are a bit different or the depth of his murders are not explained. She is able to take a fictional character and really give him a 3D life. And I think this movie could have been a bit more exploitative or just sort of, oh, look at a guy kill a bunch of women if this was a different director. And I really like that. This is my favorite horror movie directed by a woman. So I think she just did a fantastic job.
Best secondary, I've already given mine, but either of you?
Well, I had Mary Harron, but I also had Guinevere Turner because really I thought not just the directing, but the writing itself was really good in this and how it was structured.
Yeah, similar to, because just the task of taking a book and compressing it, because it is actually a much longer book than I guess your average crime fiction, if you want to put it under that. So there was a lot to compress, and film scripts require less words in general than novels. So it was definitely a task to get this thing digestible. So that's why she's at my second. And also, I feel like, as you said, Christian Bale he's my most charismatic. He is such the figure of this that I wanted to give credit to the other two behind the camera talent, because I feel like when you mention American Psycho, people just sort of go on about how great he is, which he is, but they kind of forget about the other people involved. But yeah, there are the moments where you can see, I don't know if you guys clock the moments where you can see the Tom Cruise coming through, but I feel like it's the Halperstrand where he's pretending to be Mark Halperstrand at the like Mexican restaurant and being friendly with Paul Allen. Upon rewatches, it's kind of like I can see Tom Cruise doing that to someone, or just like having that kind of like overly friendly but nothing actually going on conversation.
Let me ask a question that's completely aside from what we're talking about right now, but I've heard you mention on a couple of different other shows, particularly the Revisionist Almanac, our cousin show. Who is the protagonist in this film? Because
Well,
does Patrick really change enough to be the protagonist?
yeah, he does change enough to be the protagonist, because even though his circumstances at the end of this movie don't change, he has gone through a personal growth, if you want to call it that. Because before, it's like he wasn't really aware of it. He was kind of almost studying his own internal thought patterns, like when he's at the spa with the famous I feel lethal on the verge of frenzy, but he has a face mask on and he's in a tanning bed, which I think is a moment of comedy, because like normally you would not expect a calm person to say they're on the verge of frenzy. So he's kind of like trying to understand himself, and I think at the end he does accomplish his goal of understanding that he cannot ever get free of himself. Essentially, that he is stuck having these impulses and being in a society that will not acknowledge them, or not give him, as he says, the catharsis means nothing, the confession means nothing. I don't think, not Dorsey, the restaurant scene at the very opening, that Patrick is a different Patrick than the one that sits down at the end of the movie. So even though his life hasn't changed, he as a person is aware of that, which opening Patrick was not aware of that. So I don't think you have to have like, oh, he's completely in a new place for him to be the protagonist. But yes, he has done enough to be a protagonist, in my opinion.
Most charismatic. I have already given mine as well here, but what did either of you have?
Bale for me, as I was mentioning it, just because he is so great. He does have the shark eyes, smiling face thing down pat, and he also can be funny. It's one of those things where after you see him kill the homeless man, you kind of don't think you could ever, because that's like the most violent we see him be up in and to that point in the movie, and it's kind of like you have trouble ever after that, like giving him any grace at all. And then when he's doing his little raincoat dance, at least I found that to be funny, or like he's able to bring a level of almost silliness to the role that I think some people just would not be able to do without it looking strange.
For me, I had Reese Witherspoon simply because that was Elle Wood from Legally Blonde. It was like, wow, okay. She created the character before the character. And I thought she stuck out in the film. And it's clear to see why her career kind of took off not long after this.
I will mention at this point that we are covering Legally Blonde next season.
Oh, great. It's a fun movie, but I do not have nearly the buy-in that one other member of our family has.
One, multiple other members of our family has.
But guys, has knowledge of hair care ever helped you guys win a case in your legal practices? Because maybe you need to brush up on that.
No, but the history of polka dots did come in handy once.
Very interesting. Maybe you needed an Elle Woods on your team. Might want to look into it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have Business Cards, hip to be square, Kimball, which to me is the first time that they meet and actually have a much more lengthy conversation between the two of them. There's kind of a grilling that's going on. You could, in essence, also say the lunch near the end where they finally kind of square up exactly. That could also be associated, but I'm going to go with the first meeting. Then I have Chainsaw Massacre, which is kind of self-explanatory. To me, that's the only true like modern horror scene in the movie. Other than that, I didn't really feel horrified, except the scene where he's about to kill the black guy in the alley was cringy, but not horrifying. And then confronting the lawyer, which is almost the end of the film, but I'll use that as like encompassing kind of that the last moments of the film, essentially. Now, what did I miss?
Did you mention the morning routine?
I did not.
Okay, so I have the morning routine, and I also have, which I mentioned before, the dinner scene where he lists all the beliefs that he has, which are not beliefs that he obviously has. And the dinner, though it doesn't actually take place, I guess the ice cream eating with Jean, where he's holding the gun to her head but then takes it down. I also have the three-way with the sex workers, which, while it's not particularly pleasant, but there are comedy moments where he's looking at himself in the mirror, which I think is just kind of classic and funny. But it also shows the duality of like he is sex and image crazed, but then he's also violent. And I also think it's one of the times where we get a look into, because up until then he's only interacting with women of his social class. They're Evelyn and Courtney and other women like that are, you know, the yuppie type. And they can get out if they want to. I mean, obviously, like if he traps you in your apartment, you can't. But I'm saying like they have the resources to leave. Prostitutes don't, and they have to keep coming back to these type of men for money to survive, like which happens with Christy at the end. So it's the first time where I think we kind of, outside of the homeless man scene, we understand that his treatment of women like is can really affect people who don't have the ability to just like walk away from him. The way Evelyn could just break up with him, Courtney could just never see him again. The women at the club, like some of them do turn him down. They could just kind of like walk away and they're fine because they have money and other people in their lives that could take care of them, where these two women don't have that. I think it's like a really good look into who he is as a person.
Dad, did you have any I had missed?
No.
Okay. So then out of these, morning routine, dinner conversation, business cards, hip to be square, Kimball, three-way sex, Jean at Patrick's, Chainsaw Massacre, and confronting the lawyer, what is the best scene?
Business card.
Business card.
Business card.
Which, to throw in a little trivia, the opening title card that says American Psycho is the same font as Paul Allen's business card.
Oh.
Yeah. And like the same, like with the same bold too. Like Psycho is bolded the way Allen is bolded.
Interesting. Getting did you knows in random sections of the
throwing
show.
some more did you knows in there.
That's also my favorite scene. I do like how it's paced and frankly edited, because it's kind of quick and it's back and forth like it's a repartee kind of situation. But even the sound effects, which I guess was created with a sword being unsheathed, is kind of signifying in how they feel this is their arena of battle. How your business card is situated really means the most about you. Oh, and his has a watermark.
Yes.
Like that's a huge deal, I guess.
Yeah, and also it like right before that scene when Paul Allen approaches and calls him Marcus, there's a rattlesnake sound. I don't know if you either of you caught it, but I just like that. There isn't a lot of, you know, overly edited stuff that happens in this movie, but I like that occasionally they throw in some stuff like that. But yeah, I like that this is their sword. If this was, you know, the time of knights, this is the way that they would duel, but you know, they can't do that, so they have to have their pissing contest with their business cards, which I don't, since it's the first time watch for you, were you expecting before you actually saw the other men's business cards there to be something interesting going on? Because I remember because I remember the first time I saw it, I was expecting it to be like crazy font or colors or something that's like, whoa.
Colors. How does not one of them have any color on anything?
Yeah, it's the same bone and like harvest wheat or whatever.
It's like the scene from Parks and Recreation where they're saying, oh, we have all these swatches of black. They just look black to me. No, there's like 8 different colors. No, they're all white. I'm not the type of person that off-white, eggshell white, or no. Cream and white are the same freaking thing to me. I am color deaf when it comes to that stuff. Okay, moving on. Favorite scenes for either of you?
Let's see, of the ones that we haven't talked, I love the morning routine because that's the most influencer-y of the Patrick things. Like we're talking about bringing it into the modern era. That's like trending right now with all these influencers of like all the products they use and what they do. And it's just Patrick talking to himself. But I feel like, if the internet existed in the 80s, he would have been talking to an audience. I also noticed on this rewatch, the products he talks about doesn't line up with what he's saying, which I think is actually another level of cleverness to this movie, that the products he says he's using on his body are not even that. I mean, I don't know if it's just because they can't condense everything he's saying, but he says he's using a scrub and he sprays it. You can't use that's just not how physics works. You can't have a grainy substance come out of a spray bottle. So he's not even using the products that he says he's using, I don't know if this is just, the director didn't think anyone was going to look that closely, and I'm just reading into it. But I think there's another layer of he's so out of touch with reality, he's not even using the products the way he says he's using them. Like the way he gets, all these men confused in his life, he's even getting his beauty products confused because he has like hundreds. I would get confused too.
For me, my favorite scene is Hip to Be Square. I mean, ultimately, the level of rage and homicidal tendencies over the ability to get a dinner reservation. It's just it's tragic, it's funny, it's sad, it's I don't know how else to put it, but it just it the irony of the whole thing struck me, and I realize how much some people will hold against other people their ability to do stuff like that. And it just struck me as being just really, really on point, only but to the nth degree.
As far as most indelible moment, I really have like the ending because it leads to so many unanswered questions, especially having only seen it the one time. How I felt in that moment of deconstructing whether what we were seeing through the course of the movie was real or wasn't real. Were there parts of it were there parts that weren't, will probably, at least until my next viewing, be the thing that I primarily take away from this.
Spoiler, you'll never get the answer. I've watched it so many times, it changes every time you watch it. But yeah, no, the ending is excellent. I actually think it's a very small moment, so I don't know. Like, I didn't list it as the best scene because it's not even a scene, but it's the laugh that the maitre d' has at Dorcia. So when he calls and is like, "Do you have like a last minute 8 o'clock reservation?" And the maitre d' has the most like sinister laugh. There's just something about it that just like chills you. It's not just because he's not just like, "Oh no, like we're booked," like the way a normal restaurant would be. Dorcia like knows it's the shit, and they're like reveling in the fact that they can turn somebody away to the point that they just laugh at in their face. I mean, it's not literally their face, but on the phone in their face. And there's just something sinister about it that it's like one of the theories of the book is that everyone is an American Psycho, like everyone in this universe is, and I kind of like think the maitre d' is kind of like a Patrick that's just enjoys being a gatekeeper and laughing at people who can't get into this exclusive place. So it's small, but I don't know, it always stuck out as me as like he doesn't even say anything. He just literally laughs until Patrick hangs up the phone.
For me, it's confronting the lawyer. And for this reason, assuming everything really happened, or most of it did, and even if it didn't, he just was in his head. The confrontation, he gets away with it. No one cares. He's a rich, affluent white guy. So if you did it, well, whatever. If you didn't do it, we don't believe you anyway. So what difference does it make?
Again, the white privilege. As long as you're carrying a body in a travel bag by a renowned designer, you're probably fine. Well, that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we get back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 233 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Bruce Glover, 92, American actor. Diamonds Are Forever, Walking Tall. Chinatown, Hard Times. Robert McGinnis, 99, American artist and illustrator, creator of the iconic James Bond posters, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Barbarella, The Odd Couple posters. Ted Kotcheff, 94, Canadian director and producer, First Blood, Weekend at Bernie's, Fun with Dick and Jane. Nicky Katt, 54, American actor, Dazed and Confused, Boston Public, A Time to Kill. Michael Haley, 67, actor, The Max, Biloxi Blues, Primary Colors, Regarding Henry. Robert Traber, 72, American actor, Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Xena, Warrior Princess, Hail Caesar. Johnny Tillotson, 86, American singer and songwriter. Songs, It Keeps Right On a Hurtin', Poetry in Motion. Joey D. Vieira, 80, American actor, Lassie, The Patriot, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Jay North, 73, American actor, Dennis the Menace, Maya, Arabian Nights.
Now, I didn't have a particularly large relationship with all of these. I do have one of Robert McGinnis's posters hanging on my wall. Sarah gifted me a poster of Thunderball that has been in my apartment for some time. It was in my office for a while. I also do have, seemingly because of the same franchise, a relationship with Bruce Glover from Diamonds Are Forever. He was Mr. Wint, I believe the character name was. He's also Crispin Glover's dad, or was. But that's, other than the James Bond franchise, I really don't have a ton of relationships with any of these. Nicky Katt, I think, had a very, very small part in Dazed and Confused. I know that was like one of the leading things in his obituary, but I really don't remember him having a significant part in that movie.
From my generation, Jay North was well known, either because the older one, you watched the show, Dennis the Menace, or it was on reruns after school when I was a kid. As far as the rest of these go, no, I don't have a huge following or anything with any of them.
So we remember these here fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's make the awkward transition to best funniest lines, although that has a lot of macabre in it. I will take the obvious. Patrick Bateman, I have to return some videotapes.
I'll take there is an idea of a Patrick Bateman, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. And although I hide my cold gaze and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours and maybe sense our lifestyles are comparable, I am simply not there.
Patrick Bateman. There is a moment of sheer panic when I realize that Paul's apartment overlooks the park and is obviously more expensive than mine.
Patrick Bateman, I live in the American Gardens building on West 81st Street on the 11th floor. My name is Patrick Bateman. I'm 27 years old. I believe in taking care of myself on a balanced diet and rigorous exercise routine. In the morning, if my face is a little puffy, I'll put on an ice pack while doing some stomach crunches. I can now do 1,000. After I remove the ice pack, I use a deep pore cleanser lotion. In the shower, I use a water-activated gel cleanser, then a honey almond body scrub, and on the face, an exfoliating gel scrub. Then I apply an herb mint facial mask, which I leave on for 10 minutes while I prepare the rest of my routine. I always use an aftershave lotion with little or no alcohol because alcohol dries your face out and makes you look older. Then moisturizer, then an anti-aging eye balm, followed by a final moisturizing protective lotion.
I'll take. But even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me, and I gain no deeper knowledge of myself. No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
Patrick Bateman. Do you like Phil Collins? I've been a big Genesis fan ever since the release of their 1980 album Duke. Before that, I really didn't understand any of their work. Too artsy, too intellectual. It was on Duke where Phil Collins' presence became more apparent. I think Invisible Touch was the group's undisputed masterpiece. It's an epic meditation on intangibility. At the same time, it deepens and enriches the meaning of the preceding 3 albums. Christy, take off your robe. Listen to the brilliant ensemble playing of Banks, Collins, and Rutherford. You can practically hear every nuance of every instrument. Sabrina, remove your dress. In terms of the lyrical craftsmanship, the sheer songwriting, this album hits a new peak of professionalism. Sabrina, why don't you dance a little? Take the lyrics of Land of Confusion. In this song, Phil Collins addresses the problems of abusive political authority. In Too Deep is the most moving pop song of the 1980s about monogamy and commitment. The song is extremely uplifting. The lyrics are as positive and as affirming as anything I've heard in rock. Christy, get down on your knees so Sabrina can see your asshole. Phil Collins' solo career seems to be more commercial and therefore more satisfying in a narrower way, especially songs like In the Air Tonight and Against All Odds. Sabrina, don't just stare at it, eat it. But I also think Phil Collins works best in the confines of the group than as a solo artist, and I stress the word artist. This is Susudio, a great, great song, a personal favorite. Other than the prostitutes, I could have written this myself.
I only have short ones left.
Okay.
I have I'm in Murder and Executions, and I Want to Fit In.
Patrick Bateman. I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane?
Patrick Bateman. I have all the characteristics of a human being: blood, flesh, skin, hair, but not a single clear, identifiable emotion except for greed and disgust. Something horrible is happening inside of me, and I don't know why. My nightly bloodlust has overflown into my days. I feel lethal, on the verge of frenzy. I think my mask of sanity is about to slip.
Patrick Bateman. Come on, Bryce. There are a lot more important problems than Sri Lanka to worry about. Timothy Bryce. Like what? Patrick. Well, we have to end apartheid for one and slow down the nuclear arms race, stop terrorism and world hunger. We have to provide food and shelter for the homeless and oppose racial discrimination and promote civil rights, while also promoting equal rights for women. We have to encourage a return to traditional moral values. Most importantly, we have to promote general social concern and less materialism in young people. Lewis Carruthers, feigning tears. Patrick, how thought-provoking.
I'm out.
This is going to become the Tom Show then. Patrick Bateman. Do you like Huey Lewis in the news? Patrick Bateman. You're a fucking ugly bitch. I want to stab you to death and then play around with your blood. Patrick Bateman. Hey, I'm a child of divorce. Give me a break. Patrick Bateman. Look at that subtle off-white coloring, the tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God, it even has a watermark. Patrick Bateman. Evelyn, I'm sorry. You're not terribly important to me. And finally, Evelyn Williams. What does Mr. Grinch want for Christmas? And don't say breast implants again.
See, it's a comedy, guys.
All right. So with that, we will move to the Stanley rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film, roughly 5 years after it was made. So from 2005 to today, what is the legacy of the film? We divide this category 5 and 5 points for a total of 10 between the industry and the audience at large. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
All right. This is a very difficult one to quantify. It only exists in kind of a word of mouth situation, and really is probably only among cinephiles because of it's like a deep cut. It's for the people that focus on like the 10th track on the 4th album of Billy Joel as opposed to focusing on Piano Man. There are the obvious films that most people have probably seen, like Titanic and Avatar and Jaws, etc., that are much more germane to the average person. But this is probably, at least on an audience side, and we did not have time nor opportunity this week to poll our office staff, but I would say almost in its entirety, and speaking somewhat for them, if there were more than 2 people, and you know who you are, that from our office knew of this movie, let alone had seen it, I would be shocked, utterly shocked, particularly from the standpoint that outside of word of mouth and hanging around in cinephile circles, I would not have known necessarily about this film or have put it on our list. And so, from that standpoint, I give it a 2 on the audience side. From the other side of things, though, from an industry side, while I can't say commercially it's ever done significantly well, and we'll get to a little bit more of that with impact and significance, I do think it has at least 2 factors that make it a little bit more wide-ranging. One, the fact that it did have a rather poor received sequel that went straight to video and has basically been dismissed by everybody who made it. So at least you have that element to it. It also is supposedly at one point was going to get a TV adaptation and currently is in development for a remake of sorts by Luca Guadagnino. So I have no idea where that's going to go, but the fact that people keep trying to revisit this makes it seem like it's at least interesting to creative types and artistic people. I'd be a little bit curious to see where Guadagnino comes down on this, given his track record with certain films, and if he leans a little bit more into some of the homosexual elements of Patrick Bateman. So I'll give that an extra tip. And as we mentioned in the Did You Know section, Christian Bale's career is pretty much owed to this, and this can be, in my opinion, specifically traced to him getting Batman, because Bruce Wayne as a character is very much like Patrick Bateman, and it's not like terribly different in his portrayal of the two. If you look at the Dark Knight series, where he's masquerading as a violent vigilante in secret, but in his regular life, he's supposed to act like a rich playboy. Now, whether that character is like true to the essence of what Bruce Wayne is, I think Bale did a really good job at playing Bruce Wayne. Maybe not quite as much Batman per se. The raspy voice and the voice modulators aside, you can have your own takes on that. I still think those films are particularly great, and Christian Bale is very good in them. But there is a lot of overlap between these two characters, and I have to think somewhere Christopher Nolan saw this movie and said, that's my Bruce Wayne. So because of that, I'm going to give it a 3.5. I'm going to go with a 5.5 overall.
Okay. Not far apart. I think that the industry had positive things to say about it within the frame, and we'll get to that in impact and significant. But I think it's become forgotten for the most part among the industry. Although I think Christian Bale's career really was created by this. And for that matter, I think this was a pretty, pretty visible presentation for Josh Lucas and for Reese Witherspoon and such. So I'm going to give it a 3 for the industry. For the public, I would give it lower marks, but again, it's had a resurgence. And so I'm going to give it a 3 for that as well, for a 6 overall.
So for me, with industry, I'm going to give it a 3.5 for basically the reasons that you've said, that it basically launched Christian Bale to become Batman, and that was very impactful. He's also just considered now one of the best actors of, of living current time. I also think like The Big Short would not have been a good movie without him. So there, and many other films that he's done. So that is important. And there are not a lot of black comedies. So that's the other problem is like horror comedy, black comedy is just not popular in general. So it's very hard to kind of gauge that because if this was like, a superhero movie, those are very popular. So you can kind of gauge where that falls in the industry easier. It's hard to tell. So like of the black comedies, it is excellent. So in that space in the industry, it's well known, but then when you go out to all the other genres, it falls apart. So that's why I don't. And also like, so we'll talk about more when we get closer to the impact part. Like, but there aren't a lot of American Psycho knockoffs. The way when we talked about Scream kind of caused this like windfall of high school slashers or like tongue-in-cheek slashers, horror with a wink. That didn't really happen after this. There wasn't a lot of like internal psycho type movies that came out. However, I think maybe if we go into the realm of TV, there's a chance Dexter wouldn't have existed without this movie because it's very similar. I mean, obviously they have a different backstory, but this idea of like getting to know the internal machinations of a serial killer, I feel like was kind of soft launched with American Psycho so that Dexter could run walks, so Dexter could run. And opening credits of Dexter is very similar to the opening credits of American Psycho with the blood, but it's not blood, it's food. So I think there is a little bit of more industry inspiration. And then when it comes to audience, I guess I'm being generous and I'm giving it a 4 because it's kind of made a big, in the later years, since we're talking post '05, is actually kind of popular amongst Gen Z. I don't know if they're actually watching all of it, but for some reason, Patrick Bateman is like a thing these days. People talk about him. He's a meme now. He's a meme. So, if we were just exclusively talking maybe like elder millennials and up, lower, but he's kind of caught a younger generation's attention, not for good reasons in most cases, but I feel like the audience is actually coming back around on this movie.
All right, so that is a 6.33 average between the three of us. Impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance within the initial release window of the film, so roughly 5 years after it was initially released, 2000 to 2005. What is the impact and significance of this as shared between the industry for 5 points and the audience for 5 points for a total of 10? Dad, since I led off the last category, how about you start here?
Again, it had some decent reviews, as I indicated, but it was very mixed reviews. I know that you were talking about its release in the festivals was mixed. So I'm going to do a 3 for the industry also for within that 5-year window. I think it, again, we can probably talk about Bale and him. I mean, I think it led to him also getting the Prestige, which kind of came in there.
You can't really credit him with getting the Prestige to this movie without him getting Batman first.
I guess.
Because it's a Christopher Nolan film and it's done in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Okay. Well, fine then. But the public, it made a profit, but 38, I think it was like the 39th highest grossing film of the year. It didn't really.
95th.
95th? Okay. Really didn't strike a chord. So I'm going to go with a 1.5 for the public because I don't think it had a great reception initially. So I'm at a 4.5 for the initial 5 years.
So I'm not too terribly different from where you're at. I just have different numbers leading up to it, but I have the exact same overall number. I have a 3.5 from the industry. While it's a polarizing film among critics, I do think there were probably a little bit more positive than negative, even though I'm not sure everybody was necessarily on board, but it did have a few particularly famous supporters, Roger Ebert being chief among them, I believe. However, the biggest ticket up on this for me is that it creates the Bruce Wayne Batman legacy. If you're going to say that this is directly linked, as I probably would argue, that Christian Bale does not get Bruce Wayne Batman, and we don't get that performance in the subsequent trilogy for Nolan without this performance, I will give that an extra half a point or point up, variably from where I would normally be. Now, I will also say this does not have any awards attention, so I have it at a 3.5, primarily on the backing of Christian Bale's career kind of resurging. And you could theoretically also say this movie has a lot of people that go on to do other things. Like Lewis Carruthers is in Silicon Valley, and Justin Theroux, Josh Lucas, Chloe Sevigny go on to at least decent careers where they're doing stuff. Although at this point, Josh Lucas is basically buried on doing, is it Lowe's or Home Depot commercials? I think it's Home Depot. That's his only thing. And frankly, if I only had to do that and got paid millions of dollars to do it and be their spokesperson for 20 years, I don't think I would do anything else either. It's not a dig at him necessarily. It's just congratulations, I guess. So I have this at a 3.5 for the industry, but it's the 95th ranked film at that time. I don't see a significant boost in people wanting to view it on home video. And while I did have it at a 2, I think that in subsequent years after the initial release window, that this had a better following because of the cult status of it and through word of mouth, as opposed to when it was initially out. So I have a 1 there. I have a 4.5.
So I just did an even split of a 3 and 3. Just part of the problem is I was younger at this time, so I really don't have memories of how this was perceived in the first 10 years, other than the fact that it did create this like playground word of mouth of this being this scary movie, which why I'm giving it higher, because I feel like if it's reaching children who are 8 years old, that this movie is something, even if it turns out that this was definitely exaggerated beyond what it turned out to be, it's at least doing something to people. And also, I was in Catholic school with the most sheltered of the sheltered, gated community children out there. So if these kids are hearing about it, it's doing something. Whether that's good, I can't, because, I would have to have been an adult to really understand the full understandings of how it was impacting people at that time. But I feel like I frequently saw it checked out at Blockbuster. I remember seeing the cover, and it was often like, just the cover, no tapes behind it. So I do think there was some rental business from it, maybe not, literally a blockbuster from it, but it was gaining, I think, that cult status. So I do give it a little bit more points for audience because it did almost become like a little bit of a boogeyman for people who didn't know much about it. And then for the industry, basically all the things that we've discussed, nothing new. But yeah, it did not, for as good as this movie is, it didn't make as much money as it should, in my opinion, but it didn't do, it didn't really spawn a new genre. There wasn't suddenly like tons of black comedies or tons of serial killer related movies or even Wall Street related movies, greed movies. It just sort of happened and didn't win a lot of awards. So I think it did okay and it made an impact somehow, but it just was not, unfortunately, like the whirlwind that was Scream.
Agreed. So that is a 5 average between the three of us. Novelty. This is a measure of the novelty of the film as split between the originality of anything having to do about the film and the execution, which we give 5 and 5 points each for a total of 10. Let's let our guest lead off here.
Wait, so I only have one score for this, though. I didn't know this was a split.
Fair.
It's a 9. I'm sorry. Because it is, it's a new concept per se. And also, I think there really isn't much like the book, too. So it's coming from an original place. There aren't a lot of, even though there might be a lot of serial killer or slasher-esque movies, there aren't a lot that are great at getting inside the head of a serial killer and creating such a notable protagonist or notable killer that he does feel completely fleshed out, because there are some killers, like, I actually don't think Hannibal Lecter in either Silence of the Lambs or the other ones is really that great at it. So that's, I know, a bit sappy for some people, but sometimes those killers seem so above and beyond possible that you're kind of like, okay, but Patrick feels like you can meet Patrick. I'm sure we've met a Patrick. Everyone knows a shallow kind of douchebag who might be maybe violent. We don't know. So I think they did a great job with that. And the only thing is, it's not completely changing a genre or doing something completely we've never seen ever before. But there really isn't anything. I think Fight Club is the closest thing you can compare it to, just because of the themes and like the concept of like a protagonist who's losing his mind slowly. But they're really not that comparable. Like, as far as what happens in the book, they have a completely different plot. I mean, and movie as well. So I really can't think of a lot of movies that are like American Psycho. So that's why I gave it a higher score than maybe other people would.
As for me, I will go with a 4.5 on the Novelty. Even though I've made the comparisons to Fight Club, I do think it is a little bit more distinct from it, and there really isn't anything like either of them per se. So I'll go with a 4.5. I don't have a whole lot to say about this that hasn't already been expressed much more aptly than I can do. I just lack some of the context from some of those things. But as an execution, I don't know if this completely works for me. The ambiguity of the film, the way it kind of left me feeling at the end of it. I know that this is going to be separate from where either of you are going to go, but I have that at a 3, which I think is, I tried to be respectful of knowing that I have respect for the film, but couldn't quite get it in the same way that either of you got it. So I have a 7.5.
Okay. Originality, 5. I can't think of anybody who made the comparison or tied this so clearly together in any other film. And as far as execution, I am going to go with a 4 because I really think the film did a very credible job of presenting the Wall Street types as being unlikable, shallow, self centered, greedy, lacking in any empathy or concern with anyone other than themselves or even the world around them. And so I thought the execution was well done. So I'm at a 9.
So that's an 8.5 average between the three of us. Classicness. This is a hard to completely quantify category. Usually has to do with how well or not something has aged. And that can take many different forms. It does not necessarily need to be about the content of the movie so much as anything really having to do with it. So, Dad, this tends to be your go-to category. We will let you lead off.
We start generally at a 6. I'm going to give it at least 2 points up for the fact that it portrays masculinity or toxic masculinity in a very unfavorable light. I'm going to give it another point up for the fact that it is still poignant today because it shows the level of greed and lacking a concern for humanity that exists inherent in some aspects of capitalism. I will give it a half a point down for, well, the chainsaw scene was the one that bothered me the most because up until then, I think they were very restrained in how the murders and the violence was done. And I think that was just a little too much for me, so I'll give it a half point down. So I'm at an 8.5.
I'm going to give it a 10 because I think it stands the test of time. I think it actually has continued to be more relevant than going in the back. And anything that's particularly quote unquote problematic is there for a reason because it is showing it is not, the filmmakers don't believe what Patrick believes. That like the things he says to the homeless man is not Bret Easton Ellis or Mary Herron or Guinevere Turner's beliefs. It's not like one of those where you have to like, excuse that time has moved on or something in film. It's very clearly he's an asshole on purpose. And I think that this type of person will exist in some form, in some industry, somewhere throughout the course of human history, both past and whatever will end up happening in the future, that there's always going to be some kind of self-centered consumerist. Even if you don't even live under capitalism, you can still be a materialist who doesn't treat people well. And that type of person will always exist. People have likely encountered a person like this in their lives, and I don't really see a future where this is suddenly not relevant, even if like it might be slightly outdated because it is taking place with a lot of 80s cultures, but that to the side, I think it will always have something interesting to say about humanity.
I don't have a whole lot of points to reduce from this movie because it forgoes some of the misogyny and the rampant, explicitly violent portions of the book, as replaced by the satire of two women writers and a woman director, to be more of a commentary on this toxic masculinity, this white privilege, the vapid rich white folks commonly known as yuppies. I will give that an extra maybe point and a half, 2 points, somewhere in that direction. Again, because the violence to me does not seem particularly pronounced, save for the chainsaw scene, which even then I just find to be kind of a hallmark of a modern horror film anyway. It's there's only like one or two moments where it's particularly creepy, but not even really excessively violent. She's just scared. It does not see the chainsaw hack her up or do anything that you would find to be grotesque or even quality that would be placed within a Quentin Tarantino film where there's a lot more blood and gratuitousness to them. I'm thinking about the same point in time right now as like the Kill Bill films are much more gratuitously violent. With that being said, I also think there is maybe a point for timelessness here, given it's about the 25-year mark, which is where I start looking at that being accessible. I do think it at least warrants it as consideration because there aren't too many things to detract from the film that have aged particularly poorly. So against type, I'm at a 9. So that would be a 9.17 average between the three of us. All right, let's move to rewatchability. And usually we let our guest lead off for this category.
I'm going with a 9, mainly because there just is moments where people, myself included, don't want to watch violence, even though this movie is, tame in the spectrum of horror. I am more bothered by what we don't see, which is like the abuse the two sex workers suffer at the end of the three-way. That's more upsetting to me than the chainsaw, because like it's that whole like what you don't see, you don't know, and also the fact that they kind of thought that they were in the clear. I mean, I'm sure every in-person sex worker probably is a fearful of every job they get assigned to, and they were at the end of it and they probably thought they were in the clear. And I think that was probably more terrifying, is these two women kind of like, I did my job, I'm going to leave, and then it takes a very nasty turn, especially like the fact that Christy has like no choice but to return to him later. That's like, there's just days where I don't really want to watch that, but overall, I think it's very pleasant, as far as like efficiency and the snappiness of it. It's not wasting your time. You don't have like scenes that don't go anywhere or just like revel in itself. It's not very like, it will not waste the audience time. And there are moments that are funny. So I think it's a good, I think, rewatch. There's never been a time where I've sat down and have not been interested in seeing it all the way through, even when I know what's going to happen.
Well, for me, I would have to be in the right frame of mind to watch it. So it's not going to be something that I'm going to just throw on. Even though I love the film, it's not going to be something that I'm going to want to watch on a regular basis. So I'm going to go with a 5 for that primary reason, which is, yeah, I'll watch it again. If I see it on, I may watch it. It may be something that comes up in conversation with someone that hasn't seen it, that we end up in a discussion and we may put it on and watch it. So 5 is about the most neutral as far as, yes, I'll rewatch it. Will I really go out of my way to rewatch it? Probably not. So 5.
Okay. I've tried to be a little bit more objective about this category in recent weeks over probably the last couple of months, trying to get inside the head of the average, and which doesn't actually exist, but person who might be trying to pick this up. I think this is a heavily cinephile, approachable movie. The average film goer is going to have a very difficult time, in my mind, being able to sort through the complexity, the depth that this movie is trying to play with. And that's why I think partially I asked the somewhat pointed question early on in the movie, who the audience for this movie is. I'm not sure everybody's going to immediately be able to see the comedy or the satire behind it. We obviously have a quadrant of people that think of Patrick Bateman for some reason as a idol or somebody they aspire to, which is confusing. But I look at that similarly to how we've criticized in some circles people that want to be like Tyler Durden from Fight Club or Leo's character from Wolf of Wall Street, that there's some appealing part to just being a awful human being. I also will say, what exactly is the rewatchability of a film you need to likely see multiple times to appreciate, as I kind of led off with early on when we were talking about this, that it's not a long movie, but it's something, again, complex. And because of the inaccessibility to an average person, that I think it is a slightly slim section of the population that's going to be able to get out of this what I think both of you did and that I struggled with. I'm going to go with a 3. So that would be a 5.67 average between the three of us. Now, as far as audience score, we had an 89% for Google users and an 85% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.7. So to repeat the categories, we had a 6.33 average between the three of us for legacy, a 5 for impact and significance, an 8.5 for novelty, a 9.17 for classicness, a 5.67 for rewatchability, and an 8.7 for audience score, giving us a final total of 43.37, and currently placing it on our list between Ocean's 13 and Man on Fire for number 167.
It's a lot lower than I thought it was going to be. But I think the fact that you have to watch it multiple times is what makes it rewatchable. But maybe we have different definitions of that, because I don't want to see. I mean, if there's like comfort rewatching, then yes, obviously it depends on how you are defining it. If it's for comfort or just for fun, then maybe not. But there are certain movies that like once is enough, even if they're deep. Like, I don't really need to see Saving Private Ryan again, even if it might be an excellent movie. Done. I'm good. For Revisionist Almanac I have in 2 weeks, we had to watch Letters from Iwo Jima. Loved it. I'm not watching that again.
Yeah.
Even if like it could be more powerful the second time around, but I don't think I'm missing anything. There's no like subtle details or hidden clues or questions about Letters from Iwo Jima or Saving Private Ryan or any of the more like full drama, like going full into drama or full into like tragedy. Even something like a little bit more quote unquote girly. I've seen The Notebook once. I don't need to see it again. But with this, because there's a lingering question around what is actually happening, I think it lends itself to rewatching it more, because there is a mystery there. And maybe with something kind of like Memento or Fight Club, which we've mentioned a bunch, because there is like the audience is being held back in some way from knowing the full truth. It does lend itself to, I think, rewatching. Maybe the average person who just wants to turn their brain off, especially maybe when it came out in 2000 and there's no way to easily rent it again for a few years, I can understand that. But I think with streaming, it's very rewatchable, especially if you have a cinephile or horror or just cult interest.
I guess my point in asking the question of whether it needed to be viewed multiple times is that I'm not sure how to fall on that question. There are the movies like Inception that we're going to get to later this year that there's an obvious ambiguous ending to it, even though Christopher Nolan is on record as to what actually happened at the end of the movie. Where I think that it's on a surface level complex, but it's not really that complex. And while it takes some people multiple viewings to get everything out of that movie, I think from a pure plot standpoint, by the end of the movie, you kind of know what happens. I guess where I was trying to go with the question had to do more with if you need to have repeat viewings to understand the movie, does that make it rewatchable? Because I can think of the average person, the women of my family, my mother, my two sisters, who would not be able to understand this upon initial viewing and would be so turned off by the movie that they would never want to go back to it again because they don't want to understand. They just think of it, if I can't easily understand it, then it's a bad movie. And I see that a little too often, maybe for some of my tastes, with the occasional viewer who probably sees 12 films a year. But that's why I think it appeals in the same way to some cinephiles who are like the people from my discussion group, where they love these ambiguous movies where there's just so many different endings that you could possibly do, and they love talking about it and seeing it multiple times. So for those people, it's rewatchable. But for the average person, I'm not sure. That's something I'm going to have to sort out for myself yet, but it's at least a precursor question because we will have some more of these challenging films as we go along.
12, I can't imagine only watching 12 movies a year. That's rookie numbers, so you got to get those numbers up. It's just, maybe I can't put myself in the full viewpoint of people who would only watch it 12 times. But also, I feel like there's a subset of women who are very into true crime. I used to be one of them. After having a kid, it's much harder for me to like true crime. But there is a subset, I mean, men are interested too, but it seems like it's very popular amongst women to want to know why these things happen, especially when they are targeting women as like a self-preservation technique. So I could see, yes, maybe people like the women in your family would be turned off by that, but there is a group of women that I think are actually becoming more and more like quote unquote popular. They're maybe just more outspoken these days who would want to rewatch it because they want to know the why, the same reason why they are listening to true crime podcasts or watching horror or something, where the fact that it's not completely spelled out is actually endearing to them. But you know, what portion of the population, I'm I guess a bit biased because that's a part of my interest. But I could see that since true crime has become more of like something women are openly interested in and more comfortable talking about, that something like this, while it may not be based in truth all the way, it's something that I think could pique that type of interest of I need to understand why. Also, side note, that quote he says that Ed Gein says about the serial killer of I want to take her out or I want to put her head on a stick, that's actually Ed Kemper. So even in his world of like not getting people straight, he even gets his own serial killers wrong, which I just love that that's a little detail that they throw in and that you don't catch that sort of thing. And I feel like that the true crime girlies would have caught that, like because they're interested in serial killers. So I feel like maybe there's a true crime junkie person that this is the movie that's for them because they would have known that it was the wrong serial killer, where that would have gone over maybe someone else's head.
I don't want to completely dismiss or disservice the people who do watch 12 films a year. I do want to separate, though, for when I'm talking about my own family, I'm going to say, or at least differentiate, 12 new movies a year. They watch a lot of their same favorites, probably over. Like when we had Toy Story on a couple of weeks ago with my sister Allison, she's a person who gravitates towards the same films over and over and over again. I don't think it's necessarily possible unless you're purely watching TV with how ubiquitous streaming is amongst especially young people nowadays, that you can go without seeing at least 12 films in a given year, given how available they are to you and are basically put in your face at all times. But I digress.
12 new films with that does not necessarily include old films that people have never seen before.
New to you in any capacity. Not everybody is a psychopath like we tend to be, all three of us that have appeared on Andrew's program, and watching 12 new films from a given year is just like standard practice.
Yeah, 2006 was a lot. I have a lot of 2006 film knowledge now. I watched almost everything that came out that year, and my brain was like about ready to explode by the end of it. I was like, I can't put new information in.
I feel you. I still hold the single season record for movies watched for Andrew's podcast at 167.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I did 53 for 2014. I think I did 47 for 2005. So yeah, those 2 years alone, the more modern you get, while you are more familiar with several of the movies that are there, and several of them will be revisits, and some of them might be even comfort food. The more modern you get, the harder and the larger library you will have to sift through to get through everything to feel like you're putting your arms completely around a particular subject. In that capacity, when I think it was what you guys watched somewhere between 13 to like 18 films for 1954, I'm like, yep, sign me up for the old shit.
Yeah, I'll volunteer. The next one I sign up for will be an old one because I don't have the capacity for the new stuff. I mean, it's really fun. Like, it's fun and it's interesting to revisit stuff that you were alive during and to take like a new perspective. But it's a lot to put your brain around it.
But with that, if you have any response to our scoring on this, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at Gmote Podcast on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I think that covers all of them. Oh, we do now have a Blue Sky account. I can't forget that as well. So you can find us at any of those there, or you can find us at the website ronnieduncanstudios.com/Gmote podcast if you'd like to respond to any of those. And we do get back to all of our listener questions and responses. So I do like to be responsive, even though we're not a particularly big show. Try and make sure that we service everybody who is listening. So with that, let's go to remaining questions on this one. The obvious one, what do you think the ending means?
So I actually have 5 theories. They're very short of what happened and then what I think actually happened. So the first theory is,
does any of them involve the Beatles like The Shining did?
No, this is less esoteric and weird. Thankfully, actually, the good thing about this, it does contain its weirdness within itself. It's all just a question of what really happened and who's really. It's not like, could this be the moon landing? So I like that it's at least within its own world. So the first theory is everything we saw outside of the feed the cat to the ATM scene, which is the very clearly his psychic break, and it's the only thing that we can really pinpoint as not happening. So everything is true except for the cat ATM machine. Number 2 is everything is true except for the cat ATM machine and the police chase, which they're kind of interchangeable, but Number 3, only 3 murders actually happened. The woman from the street in the very first few minutes where he just says hello to her, because we see the blood. Paul Allen and Christie, give or take. Basically because these are the only murders that really interact with the outside world. And there's a possibility that some of the other ones are just completely made up in his head, especially with Paul Allen. He goes missing. People are worried about him. He's definitely dead. The woman from the street, there's debating over the stain. It's very clearly blood, even though he claims it's juice. This very much, in my opinion, as you can see where I'm leaning, happened. And Christy is very scared of him. She's a real person that seems to exist and be able to move about in the outside world. But all the others are a question mark. Theory number 4, everything is in his head. He is bored. His life is empty. And so this is just his internal fantasies of what he wants to do, but he doesn't actually want. Theory number 5, he is a serial killer from a past life and he is in hell right now. This is his afterlife. This is his punishment. So my theory, what I agree with, is either 3 and 5. I think there were just a handful of murders. The rest are his imaginings of what he wants to have happened. I think Paul Allen is actually dead. I think he did use his apartment to kill Christie, maybe others, but I think just Christie, because of how the real estate agent treats him. because that's another proof of like someone from the outside world that's outside of his like little Wall Street circle is treating him. She is treating him like he is dangerous and he needs to leave, and that she knows who he is. Or theory number 5, because the ending, to get a little nerdy, is a homage to No Exit, the French play, which is about 3 strangers trapped in hell and their company is the hell. The fact that they're just shitty people that have to spend the whole time talking to each other and they aren't allowed to leave. And I think that's the conclusion Patrick is kind of getting to at the end, is that he's with the table of douchebags. They cannot see him for what he is. He cannot leave them. He is stuck here. So I think that there could be even something more metaphysical happening, that he is just like not allowed to leave this place.
The last theory is the most creative, and I do think is the most enticing. However, if you're just basing it on my one viewing and face value, I also come to the opinion that there has to be at least one, if not 2, murders that clearly happened due to their connection with the outside. I'm not sure I would agree that the Christie murder makes sense to me because of how it changes tone from everything else that's happened and kind of feels a little out of body by switching to that kind of modern horror aesthetic. And so I would say the one wherever he has the bloody bed sheets, that has to be something, because somebody at least points out and does remark, what are those? And then the Paul Allen one, as you mentioned, because people are looking for him, even though none of them will eventually like find him as the culprit, but there is some, unless you're basically saying Kimball is a metaphysical imagination, I just don't know where any of that doesn't actually happen.
I'm just going to say that I'm not sure, and I'm not sure it matters.
Ultimately, I think that's where you have to get with this film is that it doesn't matter. But at least for the initial viewing, you kind of want it to matter, and so it makes it difficult for me, at least for this current viewing.
Life is ambiguous, and people's behaviors, especially when it involves greed and their own, I don't know what, feelings of self-worth and such, are unclear and ambiguous in general. So I don't think you need to go any further than that.
Question 2, is Patrick Bateman actually Patrick Bateman? We have at least enough here where you could make an argument that despite there being some people that know him as Patrick Bateman, being that he passed himself off as, I can't remember the name of the guy that...
It's Halberstrand.
Yes, Halberstrand. And he is known by somebody else to his lawyer, who you would think at least knows who his real name is, that maybe he's somebody else, or that he's been posing as multiple different people, and that adds to his confluence of sins, but I don't know.
This is actually interesting because this is the first time I've actually heard this question posed about him. I've heard other questions of, oh, is Paul Allen actually Paul Allen posed? Because in the opening scene, you see Patrick says, oh, Paul Allen's over there, and that's not Jared Leto. So there's another question of, is Paul Allen lying, or did he kill the wrong man, as a question? But I've actually never heard Patrick's identity being questioned before, which is really interesting. And I do think it's possible, especially maybe at work where everyone is like confusing each other. But there's another element, which is that his father owns this hedge fund, or is at least a co-owner. And I feel like it would be very difficult to pretend to be a son of like a multimillionaire and like work at his company without people noticing. If his father didn't work there and he just happened to be kind of like a rich prep school kid who got a job there, sure, he could maybe shapeshift around. Also, he's supposedly marrying Evelyn, and like in the book, which is hard to kind of tell them apart, they're much more serious about getting married. Their families are much more like entwined and kind of know each other. So I just think it would be hard to like have wedding invitations go out that say, you know, Patrick Bateman and Evelyn, whatever her last name is, and it be an imposter, especially when, you know, the father of the groom is supposed to be this like, you know, Lehman brother type figure. So I do think it's possible that he even has lost sense of who he even is and it doesn't even know what's going on. But I think for the most part, he is Patrick Bateman. But what that means is the other question mark.
I don't know, because there are enough clues here that I was trying to piece together some of the strands, and while that does make sense, I think it leaves it enough open-ended where there are parts of time where he doesn't even necessarily know that he is Patrick either.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly started having a psychotic break at, whether how much of this break is happening or not. So maybe Patrick is an idea that he even says that there's a concept of a Patrick Bateman, so there's a possibility that's true. To give the book a little bit more reference, it does answer more of those questions. He is given a childhood. I mean, we don't get like chapters and chapters of it, but we are given a window into his childhood. So I don't think, at least from Bret Easton Ellis's POV, that it's meant to be an imposter or someone who doesn't know his own name or identity. And like it is confirmed he is the son of like a very wealthy man, and he has like stepmothers who don't care, and it's pretty, pep school and boarding school. It's very obvious, like what you think his backstory is his backstory. But there's a part in the book where it switches from first person to third person, and everything is being described, and then it switches back, so it's kind of showing that he's like losing sense of what's happening. So I think there's a possibility that like he's just probably most likely insane. So I think that part is at least the clearest he is unwell.
All right, question 3. And I considered this at the point where we get kind of the Lewis reveal, but is Patrick Bateman closeted?
I actually think yes, ish. It's obviously it can't be fully confirmed, but he doesn't have a sex drive the way I think a typical straight man does, because he is viewing the women as just something to own. Like this Courtney is another man's woman, and that's why he wants Courtney. He doesn't want her because he finds her attractive. Her being attractive is secondary because it would be bad for his reputation to be with an ugly woman. But all the women's like the models, they're just the capital, the cultural capital that having a hot wife or girlfriend or mistress gives him. And when he's having sex with the call girls, he's looking at himself and flexing, and he's not really into what's happening. So I think he's just performing heterosexuality. I mean, it's kind of impossible to know really what his true feelings and urges are, but you would think a straight man who's violent, who gets hit on by a gay man, he's gonna kill that guy. Like everyone kind of feels like Lewis has got a mark on him when he makes that pass at him in the bathroom, but I feel like most of the audience is surprised that he doesn't kill Lewis, and in the book he doesn't kill Lewis either. And Lewis actually, like at one point, gets on his knees in a department store and like begs for Patrick's love. And instead of killing, which like I was like, oh, he's gonna get a bullet in the head. Like he's embarrassed him. He's questioned his sexuality publicly in his house of worship, Gucci. Like it's gonna be like that's as bad as you could get with Patrick. But no, he just like freaks out and runs away, and like he never is violent towards Lewis at all. And I kind of think maybe he is fighting something on the inside. He also, like, not to stereotype, but gay men are very fashion focused. They're very, there's a lot of gay culture around going to the gym and looking nice. And while other men who are straight in this world do those things, he's not the outlier. There's a chance that he could just easily fly under the radar as just, oh, I just like suits because they make me look powerful, but actually he has more of an interest in fashion. And you see Lewis seems to have the same level of interest if in fashion. He's touching Patrick's clothes and really admiring them in ways that the other males in his life don't. So I think that there's a good chance that he's closeted, or at least he could even be asexual, that he's so mentally like not there. He doesn't have normal lust. He's just like, how can I consume this person, sexual or otherwise?
Part of my question in this comes from the standpoint of trying to conceive how would a closeted man with a semi-powerful position as an investment banker on Wall Street would react, especially during the 80s, where you have the AIDS epidemic, which, while not particularly mentioned in the film, you said was a big part of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think those two in some ways work in concert. And then his reaction to Lewis is not one of embarrassment or rejection, but almost seemingly a denial of his own self. And so I wonder if that has somewhere crept into the thinking of all of these things, because as you mentioned, there are some tangential signs. The skincare routine is not something that a lot of heterosexual men necessarily go through. So there is at least there enough to question if some of the violence is his outward tendencies seeping their way through, that he cannot appreciate or be his outward self.
Yeah, I think it's very plausible that, because I would also imagine his father is not going to be particularly accepting if he did come out as a younger person. So I feel like he knows he has to keep it inside. And if he's already a little unhinged, it's probably going to start bubbling up more. Yeah, there is like, I kind of wonder if maybe the reason he doesn't kill Lewis is, if there is the AIDS thing, if the blood, like if Lewis's blood gets on him, maybe he's going to freak out. Because also, like I said in the book, there's a lot of misinformation. Like the doofus guys that he hangs out with, like just say, like make up new stuff about AIDS almost every time. Like, oh, you can't, like if you're wearing this and that, and you can't get it, or if she's doing this, you can't. Like it's just sort of like just made up like middle school rumors about sex that we all heard. That you're just like, oh, you can't get pregnant in a hot tub. Nope, that's not true. So I could maybe wonder if that's there's kind of a question of, is he scared he could get contaminated by Lewis, both like HIV or just like his ego or his reputation could get contaminated by being too close to Lewis? Because like the only time you see him actually like scared is when Lewis does the like call me thing from the balcony, and he's just like instantly like, I have to leave, I have to like get out of here, where he's not, even when he's being confronted by the cops or he thinks he's getting caught with a dead body, he's not as like cagey and like cat-like when freaking out. So I do think there's a possibility. Also, like, I mean, not that art has to imitate its author, but Bret Easton Ellis is gay. I mean, he has identified as bi, but he has had a male partner for multiple decades at this point. So I think that maybe he could be commentating on like a world where multiple sexualities or gender expressions would not be tolerated.
All right. Any remaining questions for either of you?
I don't.
Actually, I do have one. It's kind of on the same level of everything that we've been talking about, but do you think there's a chance Dorothea doesn't exist? I mean, we only actually see Patrick talk, like the maitre d' laugh, and then he calls again a second time and like fakes a reservation, but we don't actually ever see anyone else go there or talk, like, or make a call there or anything. So I kind of wonder, could like a lore about a restaurant be so like spread like almost like a rumor of telephone, where it's like, oh, there's this place that's so underground, like this happens. I've lived in New York, so like there'll be places where being exclusive or being like underground and not on Zillow and not on Yelp, not on like maps back, like especially when iPhones were in their early days, was like there was a cultural cachet about like it being unknown and like ungettable. And I kind of wonder, could like almost like a lore around a restaurant be so made up that it doesn't even exist? Because he takes Courtney there, who's allegedly been to Dorsia before, and is able to pass off a completely different restaurant to her as Dorsia, and which, sure, maybe she's strung out on drugs and she's so spoiled she doesn't even know what restaurant she's been to. But I kind of almost wonder, is it kind of like a MacGuffin? Like it doesn't even exist. It can't even, it's so unattainable that it's like fiction.
I'll be honest, I had not considered it, so I don't know
Makes
if I
sense.
have a whole lot to add.
I think it's possible. I mean, in this world of like, no one is in their own like no one has their own name, or no one is
Right.
where like people are wearing the same clothes and doing the same things. I think it's possible, or that it could just be something that got blown out of proportion through word of mouth that doesn't even really matter that much.
Right,
Yeah.
because it's only name dropped at all times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's at least an open possibility.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I want to thank our guest for being with us again. This is your fourth time. I know that you are not scheduled for being with us through the end of the year, but you will be back next season for a film that you have requested now for, I think, 3 years, in Gilda. That will be your fifth time on the show at least, unless you sign up for something in between, but that will be your hat episode.
Oh, yay. Gilda will get me a hat. Awesome. No, I think you guys will like Gilda more than this, or at least it has that classic Hollywood. There is no murder. I mean, Is there an actual murder in this? I can't remember. Well, there's no chainsaw murders, okay? There's no chainsaw murders. I can guarantee you no chainsaws, and I can guarantee no videotapes or Phil Collins references.
Well, the videotapes, I don't know. The way he says it struck me as so awkward because who called them videotapes? It was either videos or tapes for the majority of my life. And then I'm just thinking, do you have to say both in order to specify what kind of tapes? Or I don't know. It was just something rattling around in my head as I watched it, and
I
it
think
just
that's
is
just
so
like it's like a Patrick-ism. Like he's like snobby, but not like he's not like British snobby, but he's the type of person who would has to pronounce everything perfectly. I think, but it comes up in the book much like frequently that like that's his go-to to get out of any awkward situation is that he has to return videotape. So I like that. Did either of you catch that the alibi he gives for where he is when Paul Allen is killed? It's with Cliff Huxtable, which is Bill Cosby's character. Yeah. I mean, it obviously at the time was supposed to just be, oh, he made up a sitcom character, haha, but now it's kind of like even creepier because that guy is now in jail. So it just kind of was, it's funny because I don't hear that name often anymore.
You are correct, Dad. He is not currently in prison.
Yeah, I thought he was really.
He got out?
Yeah, they overturned his case on appeal.
Yeah, I see. Well, I mean, his reputation's gone regardless of where he is, so.
Yeah. Anyway, but remind everyone where you are and where they can find you.
I am at TWriteRepeat on Instagram and X. You can visit my website, vpmorris.com, or you could just look for my novels on Amazon. If you type in VP Morris, my books come up. So thank you guys for having me. It's been super fun talking about this movie.
Absolutely. We always enjoy having you on. Dad, I think what we're going to do is skip the remaining thoughts for the week due to the earlier recording nature of this. So
that's fine. I have some videotapes to return.
Not out of character. But with that, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Well, we're waiting. Next week for our 258th episode, we welcome back Instagram and Letterboxd film commentator Joe Bucari to re-hit the links as we revisit Caddyshack from 1980, written and directed by Harold Ramis, with Brian Doyle Murray and Douglas Kenny, cinematography by Stephen Larner, music by Johnny Mandel, starring Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Rodney Dangerfield, and Ted Knight. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.